Good morning to those of you watching in Asia, and good evening to those of you watching in the United States, and a warm welcome to our audience members from around the world. At this event, Mentorship Hacks, the do's and don'ts of mentorship with startup founders, is co-organized by Start Me Up HK and Asia Society Hong Kong Center in partnership with Asia Society Southern California Center, Asia Society Philippines Center, and Sketchpost. I want to thank Start Me Up HK, Invest HK in particular for sponsoring this community program, and we really look forward to more collaboration with them in the future. In today's exciting discussion with three fantastic startup founders from the US, from the Philippines, and here in Hong Kong. We also have Ming, our graphic recorder in Malaysia. So this is truly a regional and global event. We hope to shed light on mentorship engagement for startup founders, especially during and after COVID-19, and the role of startup mentors in their journey. We have Bing Chen. He is chairman and co-founder of Gold House, the largest collective of leaders forging stronger bonds that enhance Asian representation and success. And of course, he was the former YouTube global head of creator development and management. We also have our Fritz Stamopoulos. He is our global trustee for Asia Society. He's well known for being the co-founder of Qunar, one of China's largest travel platforms, and co-founder of Xiaowei, one of China's largest digital sports media companies. We also have Stephanie C in Philippines. She is the founder and CEO of Thinking Machines, which builds AI and data systems to help organizations make better decisions. And all of our speakers today are proud Asia 21 young leaders. So we're very thankful for all of them showing support to Asia 21. The panel discussion is moderated by Lavina Tien. She is founder, entrepreneur, and manager with over 10 years experience in the technology space, specializing in growth and operations, and she's helped launch Asian operations for companies like Google, Airbnb, and student.com. So we are very excited again to be bringing this program to you. We hope that the Sketchpost doing the graphic recording today will be a special edition, and we hope you enjoy watching the live sketching of the conversation as we go. Finally, for our live audience online, please do submit your questions on Zoom via Q&A function. So without further ado, I will now turn it over to Lavina. Thank you, Lavina.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here today. And thank you to all our panelists from around the world. So without further ado, I'm gonna ask each of you to tell us a bit about your startup journey. What drew you to start your business in the first place, and who influenced you most to do this? And secondly, how important was mentorship to the success of your startup? And what is an ideal mentor? Is it somebody who's a founder, someone who knows your field, or someone in other fields but has an interest in investing in you personally? So if I could start with Bing, and then I'm just going to go around.
So I actually haven't launched my new company yet, but I'm trying to build the new Walt Disney company. So a cross-pollinative media studio franchise as well as distribution platform. What drew me to this is grave stupidity and hubris as well as naivete, thinking that something like building your own thing was easy and surmountable. It is not. It is by far the greatest pain I've ever experienced in my entire life, and I would never wish it on anyone. But the good news is it is mine. And I think more importantly, the thing that really drew me to it is I wanted to see a world that candidly I thought was better than the one we were born into, one that was more representative, equal, empowering, one where everyone had the economic as well as educational resources to actually realize their ambitions. And I think one of the best ways to do that is through media worlds or media content. So that's what motivated me. In terms of mentors, I think mentorship is both horizontal and vertical. I think the second that you think it can only come from your superiors is the second you've made a grave mistake. I try to make sure and remind myself that I know absolutely nothing. And one of the best laws in startup land is even when you think you know everything and you launch, half of your theses go out the window. And so I've been really lucky to be able to learn from my teammates, from my reports, from my superiors, from friends, from strangers, so forth and so on. I think there's something to be learned from everyone everywhere.
Great, thank you. Fritz?
Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. And I'd like to thank the Asia Society again for organizing this event, and of course, Startup Hong Kong for being sponsor. And I happen to be on the development committee of the Asia Society, so if anyone wants to contribute, please send Alice an email. We'd love to have your funds. This is a difficult period for all nonprofits. I've been setting up startups since 1999 in mainland China, and I've been fortunate to have some success. I think probably the greatest inspiration for me was Rupert Murdoch. I used to work for the News Corporation, which is how I started in my career in Los Angeles. And, I was part of the China team, and we were trying to, cook something in mainland China, get back into the market. And I thought it was interesting. Mr. Murdoch had made a couple of interesting comments to us once. The first one was, we need to push the envelope in China. We need to take some risk, which I thought was pretty amazing, because it's normally the younger team members that are taking risks, and it's usually the elder statesmen in a company that are trying to be more conservative. But it was the opposite. So to me, that was inspiring that the head of a multinational media company was encouraging us to take some additional risk. And then secondly, he told me, Fritz, we make a lot of money in sports. I'm like, oh, we make money in sports. I'm going to do a sports startup. And really, that's what kicked off my entrepreneurial adventures in mainland China. And since then, I've been doing it for a very long time. Like Bing said, I think mentorship is not one way. Some people describe it as having a tribe of mentors or a personal board of directors. And I kind of feel like over the years, I've had some amazing advice from a number of people. Probably that cohort is about 10 people, I think, that have provided all sorts of expertise and advice across a litany of different areas that have been, very helpful to me. And they're all my friends now. And, and I'm super grateful for them.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask you a little bit more on that later. Stephanie, why don't you tell us a bit about your story?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Stephanie C. So I started Thinking Machines about 5 years ago now. Well, the funny thing is I started it, I was working in the Bay Area in the US, working for Google. I came back to the Philippines with the idea of understanding I just wanted to spend some time figuring out what the data science landscape here looked like. And the crazy thing is, I started the company out of total frustration. I was doing a little bit of work helping the government look at big data for transportation decision making in the Philippines. And it was so frustrating to truly understand that a lot of decisions that affect millions of people get made by 12 people in a room who don't look at data necessarily, who make decisions based on who's most senior, who's the loudest. And I thought that was crazy. So I started the company out of a sense of I cannot be any worse than any of these people. And maybe I can build tools to help them make better decisions, right? So that's what my company is all about, building AI tools so that those 12 people in a room can make a decent decision for the 100 million of us. In terms of mentorship relationships, I'm really with Bing and Fritz on this. It really is about a tribe of mentors and a mentor network that's not just looking upwards, right? It's about having a network of people who, and in my personal mentorship network, there's somebody who's 2 years ahead of me, someone who we talk all the time because we're going through similar things. Quite often, I find myself in situations where she says, "Oh yeah, that happened to me. That happened to me about 1.5 years ago. Let me tell you how I dealt with it." And so that's a very useful relationship. There's somebody quite a few years older who's seen it all in her industry. So she was working in corporate technology for 50 years, and so that worldview is very different. I also have a couple of people who are investors, who are entrepreneurs, who have worked very closely with people who are my clients now, people who are potentially partners. But it all comes down to this element where this board of mentors, they all have to believe in you and you have to deeply respect them. If they don't believe in you, um, they're just not going to be able to build a good relationship with you. And if you don't respect them, you're not going to listen to them, which makes it totally pointless. So sometimes I see people at like networking events just trying to get their business card into somebody else's hands. I don't think that's necessarily what true deep mentorship is all about. It really is about that mutual belief and mutual respect.
Great, thank you. And we'll go a little bit deeper later as well. So Bing, back to you. So you've had this great career at YouTube, really building out the creative team and engaging over 500 million content creators worldwide. So what would you say are the highlights of that experience? And did you find any good mentors there? And I'm particularly curious to hear about kind of the vertical and horizontal axis of that when you're in YouTube. How was that mentorship relationship like in terms of your career there?
Sorry, I come from the internet and don't know how to use Zoom. I think the most thrilling thing is being able to birth something from nothing. There is no greater joy. It's sort of the God powers, or if you're pious, but there's no greater joy than inventing a new industry. You know, we effectively created the influencer marketing industry from nothing, which now collectively across platforms is worth more than $50 billion, for better or worse. So I think that probably is the most thrilling thing. In terms of mentorship, I mean, I think about it in a couple ways. I think it's especially hard in a startup landscape. And even though it was at Google and YouTube, it was very much an entrepreneurial effort because we were creating something that didn't exist. It's hard to find mentors who know things when you're creating something that doesn't exist. And so I think one of the best canonical lessons there is, one, just being vulnerable enough to share in that struggle and try to learn together. I think second is, because humans are creatures of habit and progressive in our evolutionary state, we do revolve in what we create. So things is sort of the circle of life. So birth, life, death, rinse and repeat. And so even though a lot of what we were making at YouTube was novel in its exact form, it was actually a replica or adaptation of something that we had seen from other industries that was already proven. So one easy example is I created the gold play button in 2011 because, and it's literally a 24-karat gold play button, and we give it to you if you've hit 1 million subscribers. And the reason we created this was not for vanity or because I like gold, which I do, but it was because we realized that in order to progress in any system, you actually needed a calibration of success. Will Smith, the actor, once famously said, "You can't know where you're going unless you know where you are." So we realized that a public-facing calibration of excellence was vital, and there were several different indicators in the industry that had this. The music industry famously has a gold record, a platinum record, and so forth. Airlines, of course, have tiered systems that are almost always based on similar colors. And so we adapted from those as well. So I think that's the other important thing. Even if you're starting something new and feel like, there may not be proven experts in the exact form for what you're building, the reality is, because we are concentric creatures who are similarly minded, you'll at least be able to extrapolate something that someone else has done before.
And you've obviously also worked with so many young content creators. Where have you seen mentorship adding value to their work, actually? So from your perspective, how do you see mentorship affecting themselves?
Well, the honest answer is many of them are babies, and so they need babysitters. So that's the honest. But no, I mean, I think, look, the reality is we're all trying to do the best we can with what we have by what we know. And so I think a lot of these people, their challenge is not necessarily finding mentors, it's finding the right mentors who will take them to the next level. Because especially when you're in a creative space, especially when you're in a vulnerable startup space, you tend to gravitate towards people you trust. And the people that you trust intrinsically through your existing social structures, particularly family members or close friends, are not necessarily the people you should be relying on for business. One of the most dangerous things you find with artists is they often will grow up, blow up, and their parents, their momagers and dadagers, as they're known colloquially, are their partners, their business partners.
Right.
And the problem is, your parents' job is not to make you filthy rich and famous. Your parents' job is to make you safe. And so we see a lot of rub happen there with artists. And I think you see a very, very similar thing with founders, where people tend to partner up with their best friends because, of course, why not? And you actually see it become very catastrophic.
Got it. I'll go a bit deeper into that later. So Fritz, so you're a serial entrepreneur who started very different companies, from travel to sports media in China, like you mentioned earlier. So how did you first go about networking and building up your knowledge base in those areas? And were there key persons in your life that helped you overcome those first days of startup life?
I think it's interesting. Like we talk about mentors helping us, but it also starts internally. And studies have shown that having self-awareness is the number one trait of a successful entrepreneur. And I'm glad that Bing mentioned it when he said, "I don't know anything," and that's a sign of self-awareness. And for me, it was the same thing. When I first moved to China, I realized after a couple months, you know what? I don't know anything. I'm not. I don't even speak the language. And having that self-awareness just drove me to say, okay, if I don't know anything, then this is a puzzle that I have to figure out. And so it really starts from ourselves, self-awareness. And it is interesting. And then from there, I started a journey of meeting a lot of people to really understand, the Chinese market and kind of the landscape there. And of course, that meant reaching out to people I didn't even know, trying to optimize my approach. And what's funny was, and everyone knew me for this. When I remember my first meeting, and I met this guy. He was working at, I think, Young and Rubicam, an advertising agency. And back then, we were all chasing advertisers to kind of fund our startups and stuff like that. And I asked him, hey, how do you motivate your Chinese staff? And he gave a great answer. And then I started asking that question to everyone I met. How do you motivate your Chinese staff? How do you and meaning it was just like this unending list of questions, that being the first question, to really try to understand what was going on and just gathering that knowledge. And so from that perspective, trying to manage people, right? And of course, startup success includes not just deep domain knowledge, as we like to describe it, which is, the industry ecosystem and value chain and all that sort of stuff, and who are the key players, which is also important. But then, how do we utilize our people resources? How do we utilize our technology resources and maybe new management processes? And obviously companies like Google and Facebook have been like innovators, not just in their products, but in also how they manage people, and really trying to learn from everybody. And of course, in mainland China, like Tencent has been a phenomenal company and how they manage their people too. And so anyways, like I just went through that whole process. And of course, along the way, you have this wide, I like to describe it, there's a wide net. I've having met a lot of people, and some of those you click with. And so sometimes we have to appreciate the serendipity and randomness of who might be someone who can be helpful to us, who can mentor us and provide unadulterated advice. And, that takes a little bit of time. And so sometimes having this wide net, because we're not sure who that might be. There's the star person, at kind of at the conference that we're chasing. I think Stephanie was saying that, but that may not be kind of the right person. It actually might be the person on the sidelines. Like Neil Steffen said in Snow Crash, that the most interesting things happen like on the sidelines, right? And obviously Bing's a sci-fi fan. I know the Millennium Falcon. I'm a sci-fi fan too. And and so we go on the side there, and we can meet the most interesting people that might be a little bit more quiet, a little bit more thoughtful, and they actually have the time to help us too. And so having this wide net, because we might click with different people, and also people who are amazing and can help us. I mean, frankly, they have many choices, right? I mean, they're super busy. I mean, Rupert Murdoch's busy. Barack Obama is very busy. He doesn't have the time to talk to me, right? But maybe if there's an X factor that resonates with, it is interesting. Like a friend of mine is a mentee of Barack Obama because he has an X factor about him that kind of works, right? Apparently I don't have that, but maybe with someone else I might have it, right? And so we have to cast that wide net. We have to be very disciplined about it, continuous, looking for mentors and engaging with the wider community requires a very disciplined, continuous process. And sorry for going on so long. And I would also add that we have to be very strategic. And being strategic is we have to kind of understand, what are the areas that maybe we need help on? Sure, there's leadership and management and all that sort of stuff, but there could be things related to like our industry or subsections maybe of our industry that are really important. or it could be related to certain geographies, or it could be related to certain functions, marketing, finance, government relations in China. That's a big deal. And it really is a unique set of capabilities. And, you know, and sometimes we have to just think in our mind, okay, I can navigate my networking and my outreach and seeking mentors across those, like, across these areas.
Great, thank you. So Stephanie, so you've built a valuable company by returning to the Philippines, where not many data science companies like yours existed, as you were telling us earlier. What are some of the challenges that for founder of trying to build out a business in a place with not so much infrastructure like what you did?
Hey, so oh man, what aren't the challenges? So maybe before I talk about that, I'm going to talk about why it's really fun to do it this way.
Sure.
Right? Um, I started my career in San Francisco Bay Area, where there are a lot of best practices around how to build startups. There's a lot of venture capitalists. There's a lot of very good engineering and technology talent, and for the most part, people um, people are trying new things. But there's a set of best practices. There's a mindset around problem solving that exists, right? But when you do something in a place where that mindset doesn't exist, where people have never seen that problem solved before, where there are no best practices, 9 out of 10 times, people will just try to do things their own way, and 9 out of 10 times it fails terribly. But the 10th time, you get a really, really unique spin on a problem, on a solution that you thought you already understood. And that's what I love the most, that sense of like, wow, that's new, that actually works, that's so fun. So when I have people working on my team here in the Philippines who I challenge them with a startup problem, they've never met anybody who solved this problem before. They're really trying to come up with their own way of tackling it. And they just come up with these like amazing, absurd solutions that work great. And that like fun and novelty factor is what keeps us going, really. And I think it really does make up for the lack of an ecosystem, right? In the Philippines, you don't have a ton of you don't have venture capitalists who've brought startups from like a seed stage to exit. I think we've only ever had um, two real tech companies that have gone all the way to an exit. One of them, CoinsPH, got bought by Gojek last year. Fantastic company, great founder. I think Ron Hose brought his company to, I can't remember how much Gojek bought them for, but I think it is like the single largest exit for any Philippine tech company. And that was only like a year and a half ago. And since then, nothing much, right? So it's really quite tricky. I think for me, the hardest part is your customers don't really exist. So you don't really need investors if you can get customers, right? Customer cash is better than investor money any day, any day. Um, so if we're talking about customers in the Philippines, there's two potential kinds of customers. One, enterprise customers, those big conglomerates and companies. Two, you're a startup that you're selling to just like people, right? Just like B2C companies. So for the former, so my clients are mostly enterprise customers. And it is so hard to deal with conglomerates and procurement in conglomerates. They're not used to buying software as a service. There's no IT manager who can put a credit card down for like a $200 a month subscription, right? Like you do have to go through procurement and approval. And if you have to wait 6 months to get your $200 a month in for a software as a service product, you're dead. If anybody out there has like questions about how to grow an enterprise business in a place like the Philippines, like please, I have so many stories for you. I can talk for the whole hour about that. And when it comes to the second part, dealing with customers, the Philippines doesn't have a great digital payments ecosystem. So that's something I would, if you're thinking of starting a startup somewhere, look at your potential customers, look at who you're trying to solve problems for, and figure out like, can they even pay you, right? Because in the Philippines, when I first started this company, we didn't have a good digital payments ecosystem, which meant that any company trying to serve people, they had to learn how to do cash on delivery. They had to figure out how to build like payments systems. So now it's much better, but I still think like the situation is kind of iffy. So yeah, long story short, the biggest challenge is if people cannot pay you. If people cannot pay you, you can solve their problems all you want, but your company is never going to go anywhere.
Got it. Thank you, Stephanie. So back to you, Bing. So you've been known to give some rules for networking. One time you've said, don't ask for half an hour, don't ask for a coffee, don't ask for lunch. What are some of the most creative ways that you've had people ask you for help? And what do you think is the key to kind of maintaining healthy relationships? As you mentioned earlier, people find, family members or their partners as their mentors, and that kind of blows up and explodes. So what is the key to kind of sustaining a healthy relationship with their mentors?
Yeah, I think the first thing is what Fritz said earlier about being really intentional. I think a lot of people think, oh, you have to, not ask a favor and you have to keep up with them and wish them happy birthday and send them an article when you think of them and do it quarterly and all this other nonsense that you learn at B school. And that's fine. It's just exhausting and untenable. And so I think, even though it seems transactional, the reality is the more senior people go, the less time they have for anything else. And so the more deliberate you can be so that you come every time in a thoughtful way with something that is mutually beneficial, the more successful you will be. I think the second thing that is rare is when I was in fifth grade, my teacher, Mr. Seabrook, once said that there are two types of mentors. There's two types of everything. One is those mentors that you look up to. And then second is those mentors who are able to look inside you and tease out what you are meant to be. And finding the latter is very, very hard, because there is inevitably nothing in it for them. Some of us have this in the form of executive coaches and therapists, but many of those are price prohibitive and don't always have functional sort of experience. So if you can find that sort of mentor, I think that's also very valuable. In terms of Kinchi tactics, one that I swear by is you ask for 5 minutes from everyone. I think one of the biggest junior mistakes that I still see every day is someone asking for half an hour or dare they even an hour of someone's time. No one has that kind of time, even though we're all at home right now in lockdown. And so if you ask for 5 minutes, it takes a real jerk to say no to a young person who needs 5 minutes. And you'll almost always get a yes, and that 5 minutes always becomes at least half an hour, if not longer. So that's for sure one. I think another thing is being very careful about asking for anything practical in the first meeting is dangerous. If you ask for a job, funding, et cetera, in the first meeting, unless there were established auspices for that, you will be written off immediately. So instead, I think asking for something soft, like, I'm thinking about raising capital in this way. Do you think that's the right approach? And then inevitably, if you're worthy and the person is amenable to it, they will introduce you and or invest themselves, right? So I think that's important too. And then I think the final thing that's really important, especially for the overzealous, overly ambitious young people, is remembering that life is not about being impressive. It is about being memorable. And I was dinged for this. One of my closest mentors is the former chairman of Disney. And this was one of our earliest coffee chats. And he asked me, he was like, Bing, how are you today? And of course, because I was an overzealous idiot who's 21, I rattle off my resume. And he stopped me at the 7th minute of me reciting my resume and said, do you know what your problem is, Bing? You try too hard to be impressive and not hard enough to be well liked. Which changed my life forever, because I realized maybe I'm a loser. And so anyway, the punchline there is, if you're in the room, you are already impressive enough. So you don't need to qualify yourself if you're invited in. The next step is, how do you make sure that they never forget you? Obviously for good reason, right? And one of the best ways to do that is to find human commonality. Did both of our fathers die when we were young? Do we both love fishing, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To Fritz's point earlier, not always possible, and that's okay. Not all humans are supposed to match, but where it is possible, that relationship will endure.
How do you go about identifying that mentor that you said that you both look up to, but can also look inside you? Is it, as Fritz mentioned earlier, something that's a bit more serendipitous, or can you actually be intentional in finding people who you believe can actually look inside you and tease out things that you might not be aware of yourself?
I think generally Fritz is right. It is a little bit serendipitous artistic. It's one of those, dating is not a linear progression. It is a very undulative dance, right? It's like, do you like me? Do I like you? Do I hate you? Am I cheating on you? Are you cheating on me? Are we into this? Are we not? It's just one of those volatile things, right? And I think mentorship is very similar because it's a derivation of another form of relationship. That being said, and this will be a little bit paradoxical to what I just said, but I do believe in asserting yourself vocally. So if you are looking for something, I'm a big advocate of you being explicit about that. So, and there's many religions on this, by the way, but if you're looking for someone who can look inside you and help you figure out what you're meant to do, you should say it that way. You shouldn't beat around the bush. And when you find the right person who responds to that, they will be the right person. Many people are afraid of this form of vulnerability because they think it makes them look weak or annoying or whatever. But I think, again, at the end of the day, especially for the most senior people, being candid and being courageous enough to be that level of vulnerable is very rare and actually shows that you're a much stronger human being than others who are not.
Thank you. So Fritz, moving back to kind of the Asian context, so Asia is seen as a place of networking, and you're someone who's lived here for many years. What are the do's and don'ts of in Asia when it comes to advice seeking? You mentioned earlier, being intentional, being deliberate, even in some ways being aggressive helps. But obviously, in an Asian context, things might be a little bit different. People might not appreciate somebody who's a little bit more upfront, more proactive. So, what are your thoughts on that? And am I being stereotypical myself?
Yeah, maybe like a few large buckets. What I found is if someone is completely committed to their vision, very serious and thoughtful, strangers are very much within the industry are very happy to help them out. Versus if my cousin calls me, he said, I kind of want to go to China, but I'm not quite sure. I'm like, okay, sure, I'm going to give some advice too, but someone who's very thoughtful and serious, I don't care who they are. I'm very happy to help anyone who's serious. And it is kind of funny because how mentors think about it is it's almost like, hey, if someone's serious, the probability of success is going to be much greater. I would love to be part of that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one bucket. And then I think another bucket that's very important is this is a two-way relationship. There are things that junior people or people just starting out could also provide some value in return. I was actually very lucky in China because I was doing this thing back in 1999 called the internet. And so I had this special knowledge that, that a lot of people wanted to find out about. In fact, including, I was very fortunate. I mean, the first time I was exposed to the Asia Society was when I met Gerald Chen, Ronnie's brother. And, he was just he was a sponge. I want to know about the internet. And he had this amazing conversation, right? And so I was providing some value back too. And so I think we need to keep in mind there's a two-way process. And does it mean you have to have a research report as a young person starting out? No, but you could have some well thought out ideas, right? I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. You could do some research. You could do some, I mean, you could do anything just to throw out, hey, you know what? I have some ideas. And so I think maybe that's a second bucket. It's just to recognize this is a two-way process. So be committed is one bucket. Be very serious. And it is tricky, right? Because the reality is young people have an opportunity to move and pivot a little bit, which is fine too. And but if you could just somehow communicate that strong intention, that's going to be great. Now the third bucket I think is this idea of manners. I think we need to have manners, sometimes. Yes, we should be forward. I mean, there's examples of, I would someone is trying to mentor with me or whatever, hang out with me, and I'm like, hey, call me if you have any questions. And then this American guy sent me 15 super detailed questions. I'm like, you got to be kidding. It was almost like he was doing a research report. I'm like, I mean, what is this? And then, so it was funny. So after every single question, I said, Google, 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 Google. We can talk about this one. Google, Google, Google. Meaning, we should have some manners, right? Don't suggest coffee on a Sunday night if someone has a couple kids, right? Ask for 5 minutes right before lunch. That's always a good time, right? Or maybe at the end of the day, stuff like that. I think this idea of manners and I think when we think about good manners and good form, I think it's just recognizing the other side and what are their needs, and showing that little a bit of respect. And and maybe the fourth thing I would say is what really resonates, or like when you go to a Hermes shop in Beijing or like a Chanel shop, the help staff are so obsequious. They're like servile. They're kowtowing, trying to get the business. And, that's super annoying, I think, right? I mean, can't we just be cool? I mean, we don't have to be arrogant. We don't have to be super disrespectful. And at the same time, we don't have to worship, can't we just be young, you're cool, you're confident, but you recognize that there's some things that you need to learn. And, I think there's a certain demeanor that it's kind of tricky, right? Because we all get intimidated when, you know, the famous person walks into the room and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, even Robert Redford is just sick of people saying, "Oh my God, you're Robert Redford," right? He would just, all these, all these accomplished people would just love to have a drink and make fun of other people in the room too, which is what we all want to do, is just make fun of other people, right? Or whatever, chat and hang out and to kind of get over that. And so if you can get over that, and if you can have that demeanor, and some people are really good at that, but, like we all get intimidated, or, that aura. And so I think that would be the fourth bucket, if you can work on that, it just becomes such a turnoff when, oh my God, and of course the fifth thing, which makes total sense, like Bing said, don't make a specific ask, right?
Right.
Oh, can I have a job? Or, instead, I'd love to get your, like, like how to make friends and influence people, right? Yeah, people love to talk about themselves, so just ask a few questions that
Shift it back to them.
Yeah, ship it back to them. And like, it can't be a basic question like, how did you start out in your career, right? It has to be something like, do you have any secrets on how you network, or how you, or something like that, right. That is slightly different than the typical question that you get. And I mean, you can imagine, right? If some famous person is speaking, at Harvard, and, the first 5 questions are going to be so lame and standard, right? What's the secret to your success, or something like that, kind of forget all those. I mean, you could have a similar intent, but a slightly different spin. I think certainly resonates. I think those are some random thoughts that I think would be helpful.
Thank you. So Stephanie, so you mentioned earlier that, one of the biggest headaches you've had is paying customers who actually, give you cash and pay you. Just throughout your journey with thinking machines, what was your kind of mentorship journey like in terms of asking for advice on dealing with, problems like getting customers to pay you? How do you go about identifying people who could help you or give you advice on making these decisions or solving these problems?
I think we've all, like Fritz, Bing, and I have touched on this, but it really is worth explicitly saying that mentorships are about building relationships and not about transactions, right? Because often when we talk about the value of our mentors and the value we provide as mentors, it's easy to talk about specific examples where we've been helped or where somebody's helped us. So those are more, but those are more like offshoots that come out of having a strong relationship with somebody. So kind of coming to mentorship from the way of I need to identify somebody who can give me X, and then trying to find the person is a little bit for me backwards, because I usually try to work from the perspective of who can I find people who I resonate with, who I could learn from, and who would be interested in learning from me also, and then from those relationships, typically then we're able to identify oh my gosh, you're on the board of this company, which I've been trying to work with. Could you please help me with X, Y, and Z? And because I didn't approach them with the intent of seeking out this transactional outcome, things usually go by much better because it's based on this relationship. So for enterprise sales, I was pretty lucky in that I ended up being connected to the Endeavor organization. So Endeavor is a global what do they call it? It's a global NGO that supports that's provides mentorship and advice and support and sometimes funding to younger entrepreneurs. And the interesting thing about in the Philippines, the Endeavor board is made up of very senior executives, all of whom are very gung-ho about supporting younger entrepreneurs. So I had a few conversations with people on the Endeavor board, and just in the course of having these conversations, explaining what I was doing, what challenges I was facing, they were able to give me a lot of great advice on how to handle corporate procurement. And in some occasions, maybe backing up for people who've never tried to sell to corporates before. So very specific example, one of customer number 3, the third customer I ever had is Meralco, the big power utility in the Philippines. So they basically have a monopoly on power distribution in this country. And so I pitched them for 2 months, and they said yes to us building a couple of machine learning models for them. So great, awesome. They signed the scope of work. I thought we were good. they signed off on a $20,000 contract. I'm like, amazing, that's amazing money. Oh my God, guys, like we're gonna make some money. Then they forward the contract over to procurement, and my nightmare begins. So the way it works in these big conglomerates is that the business unit is going to approve the way is going to approve of the scope of work with you and say like, oh, these are, this is a great startup, these are great kids, I want to see if they can help us. But they have to take this contract and then they have to send it to their finance and procurement division, which by most corporation rules is separated from them by a firewall, so that the business unit cannot actually dictate that the procurement and finance unit work with us. Procurement is used to buying things like staplers. So when you buy a stapler, to make sure that there's no fraud or funny business happening, they have to get like 3 competing bids for a stapler, which I'm like, okay, great, that makes sense for a stapler, but it doesn't really make sense for technology, right? Because there's no way you can get 3 bids for a unique product. But they have to give it their best effort, and they have to be able to like match up how you price versus how other people price. They have to make sure that you as a company are not going to run away with the money and are not going to vanish, which means they asked us for 3 years of annual financial statements. And at that time, we'd only been incorporated for, I kind of want to say, a month and a half. Did not have 3 years worth of annual financial statements. So we were almost totally booted from working with Meralco at that point. And at the point at which the mentor was really, really helpful to us in this scenario was how did this happen? I'm just trying to recall the exact situation. The business unit we were working with in Meralco gave us like a hint that procurement was about to boot us from the running for being a startup and not having existed for like 3 years. At which point I'm calling procurement every day, right? I'm trying to convince them that we're real, I promise. Procurement's having none of this because they say like, look, my rule book says you have to have been around for 3 years, I have to get 3 competing offers, and then I'm going to negotiate with you, because while the business unit approved of this price, it is my job as the procurement team to make sure that Meralco gets the best possible deal, which means I'm going to ask you to cut another 20% off of your price tag after the business unit had already negotiated down like 30%. I was just pouring my heart out to an older entrepreneur that I had met through the Endeavor space, and he told me, okay, look, you're going to encounter this problem over and over and over again, but here's the interesting thing about procurement: they can be overridden. And I was like, what? You can override these things? Like it's not set in stone? And he said, yeah. You have to make a case to the most who can override procurement: the head of finance or one of and he identifies for me the organization chart of Meralco and tells me who has like overriding decision-making power and says, the rest is up to you, good luck. And so I cold call. I cold call quite a few of these people. I send them our deck. I try to reach out through the business unit I'm working with, saying like, okay, can you put me in touch with any of these 6 people? And can you please, like, I want to work with you, you want to work with us, right? For this to happen, and for you not to have to work with IBM or Accenture or another organization who's been around for like 15 years, you have to help me get this piece done. So that took another 4 months. We did find somebody who got really excited about as a startup, because yeah, senior people, they want innovation, novelty, and excitement too. You just have to make the case very strongly to them that you maybe don't know what you're doing, but here is like, and I didn't try to pretend that we were going to solve all their problems using machine learning and AI, right? But I made a very strong case that the Thinking Machines organization, we were going to work our hardest. We were very smart and capable. We had a very strong concept for them, and got them excited about what we were going to do. And so we did manage to get one of those overriding people to step in for us and tell finance that he would take the responsibility if I ran away with the money, which I did not, thankfully. I actually did the work really well, and they're now one of our longtime clients. But every single one of our first, I can name every single one of our first 10 customers and exactly how we managed to get through procurement But our life as a company really changed once we hit that 3-year mark, when we stopped having to, we don't say that we're a startup anymore to these conglomerates. We say that, we're 5 years old. 5 years is like an established company, right? But just surviving to that point is really important for any startup that wants to work with companies. Sorry, that went on for quite a bit. But I think that not a lot of startups sell in the space that we do. So there's just a lot of like very interesting nuance to selling into the space.
No worries. There was actually a question from the audience about this, so it's really good that you were able to share your story. So on that note, I'm going to move to Q&A from the audience that we have here today. I'm just going to throw out the question and just kind of see which one of you wants to answer. So the first question is, how many mentors are actually qualified to be mentors? Successful people aren't necessarily good mentors. And in many ways, mentors actually need to be trained to bring out self-efficacy. So how many mentors that you've seen are actually qualified to be good ones, or how do you find them out?
I'll be brief. I don't think it matters how many there are in total. I think all it takes is one to change your life. The end. So this is not a, how do I say? This is not an abundance play. This is a scarcity play. The end.
Plus, I think it's two ways. You have to be able to extract that information too, right? As I think as the receiver of it, right? You have to be open-minded, not too defensive, and also curious, and really dispense with the personal ego sometimes. And so, yes, it's true. A properly trained mentor understands all those psychological tricks, I suppose. But, and I suppose if you defined it that way, you would have a limited set. But lots of people could provide all sorts of interesting advice, and you just have to be a sponge and try to figure that out and figure out what it is, right? Oh, and keep in mind, even the bested mentors, 1/3 of their advice probably is useless. So it isn't like some, messianic person that everything they say is gold, right? It isn't that way at all, right? You have to, the rule of thumb is 1/3 of the advice you hear is useless, 1/3 is valuable, and 1/3 you have to pretend like it's valuable to give face to your mentor. That's probably how you should think about it.
The onus is on us to actually
That's what I think.
Discern what's good advice. Any thoughts, Stephanie?
Yeah, it's really surprising. I've actually never seen that research shows that mentors need to be trained. I feel like that is maybe, are you more looking for an executive coach maybe? Because I guess like it depends what you want to get out of the mentor relationship, right? And not every mentor is going to be right for you, and because you're not going to be right for every mentor. It kind of coming back to what Fritz was saying about that X factor connection piece. Like who can you learn from, and how can you listen, and how can you ask questions in the right way? I would challenge that this is much more of like a two-way street. It's not just about how many mentors are qualified to be mentors, but what kind of how good are you at asking the right questions, listening carefully, and pulling out of people the things that you can learn from them. Because mentorship doesn't, again, like it doesn't just come from people who are more successful than you or older than you. It really can come from, learning can really come from people who are newer in the space than you are, who you're supporting. That's why people want to mentor you usually, because they want to learn something from you too. So kind of taking that mindset helps to set the stage for a stronger relationship. And yeah, sometimes you only need one, but the way I deal with the people in my like tribe is very much that different people have different areas of expertise. And I am in the tribe of some of these people also, where if they ask me questions about management, throw ideas around about how to sell to enterprises, about bootstrapping, about data and data technologies, I'm so happy to answer, and I have a lot of like insight to share. But if I'm asked about cryptocurrency, for example, I don't know anything about crypto. I'm like not the right mentor for that specific topic. So one way to think about it might be to have like different mentors for different topics, and just pull out what you can, the valuable insights from each person as you go.
Got it. Thank you. So the second question is, it's a bit more timely. So now with COVID-19, right? How do you think kind of virtual mentorship models work, and do they work? And the question here specifically asks, you know, how can especially we deal with mental health, especially with kind of the pandemic affecting a lot of the mental health of quite a lot of people around the world in various levels. Like how can a potential mentorship model work in this new world?
So I mean, let's break it out a little bit. So there's professional mentorship and there's personal emotive mentorship. There's enough data that demonstrates that people feel more comfortable being vulnerable and expressive when they actually aren't physically proximate to others. This is why a lot of therapy sessions are over the phone, because people tend to share more when you don't have to look someone in the eye and sort of, you know, share your deepest, darkest secrets. So I actually think that's, you know, improved. And it's also made, you know, things like mental health access and so forth more accessible. On the professional mentorship side, I mean, it really depends. If you have a meaningful relationship and you're deliberate, you will find ways to, you know, replicate what you had in person virtually. So, you know, for instance, if you like to add a very tactical level whiteboard, you can whiteboard on Google spreadsheets, right? If you have singing lessons, you can get a snowball microphone and use the right sort of virtual live streaming service. So you sing, you know, you sound, you know, in pitch and synchronous, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's always a way. I think the greater challenge is mental health because this is such a novel experience for us. My therapist actually calls this latent PTSD, where many of us who may not be directly impacted by COVID, we're healthy, you know, even if we were to get it, it's unlikely we would die. It's despite, and we have good jobs and we, you know, can pay our bills, et cetera. Despite all that, we still feel an immense amount of anxiety and can't sleep. And the reason why is because for structured, ambitious people, you usually have a deadline and your life is usually controllable. This is not controllable. At least in the States. You know, Taiwan has clearly gotten this under control, but that's about it. And so, yeah, I think, you know, when there's no end in sight, things get very difficult. And so a couple of just specific things one can do. The way that you engender sort of mental ease is through stability. And so you have to actually concoct sort of semi-artificial stability structures in your own life. So an example is many of us go to church on Sundays. If you don't have church, there's a way to at least have some sort of weekly at the same time ritual where you can recenter yourself and remind yourself of what you are doing, whether it's your goals or otherwise. Second is everyone and their mother meditates. We all know the gospel about this. I think the nuance on meditation is people underestimate how meaningful 5 minutes a day can be. People also forget that actually doing it in the beginning of the day is just as, if not more effectual than doing it at the end of the day before you sleep. And the reason why is because it helps provide clarity and sort of reduce any of the latent anxiety you may have had that night in your sleep before you actually proceed forward with the day. And then I think the final thing is just being very open and honest with yourself about how you're feeling is a great start. One of the problems with mental health is it tends to exacerbate when you sort of inhibit it. And so if you're able to express it in a regular, consistent way, at least it's sort of out there and your mind starts to think that because it is out there, it is more tenable and controllable. So one specific example is you should be journaling every single night about, let's say, 1 to 2 to 3 topics that are very consistent. You don't have to calibrate how they're evolving over the weeks or anything like that, but just the act of getting it out there is a very, very meaningful first step. And fresh air. Fresh air is very important.
I'd kind of like to tackle the other side of that question, right? Which is how do you initiate? How do you begin a relationship, a potential network, a potential mentorship relationship in the pandemic setting? When you can't meet in person, there's so much lost, right? When you meet somebody, there's like what you're saying to each other, but there's also the body language, there's also the vibe of the event, there's also all the context that is in that meeting that just vanishes when you're trying to connect with somebody through a totally online mechanism. My strongest advice here would be you have to make up for the lack of nonverbal communication through becoming a better writer. I really think it is about being able to express yourself better in writing, show your energy, show your thought process intelligence, show um, kind of educate people and like tell people what you're about, right? Like what is the topic that you're interested in? What is it that you truly care about? Maybe you do this through writing. That would be that's what I do. That's my strength. But for some people, they're much more like video people, right? Maybe this is your moment to become a TikTok star. I don't know. But putting short or long form videos up where you're discussing your area of interest, that is more of a lighthouse strategy, right? So there's the strategy of like you reaching out. I guess it's like more of like a fishing strategy, and there's like the lighthouse strategy of you just shining your light and luring people in almost. People who are interested in your topic, people who think that they want to learn more about your space, who you could learn from and develop these mentor relationships with. I think that um, given that we're not going anywhere, like I'm probably going to be stuck in Manila for the next year. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not even going outside of my house these days. That is probably the only way I am going to be able to reach out to other people, and other people are going to be able to reach out fresh to me.
It's just on my own experience. A lot of the founders and entrepreneurs that I talk to, and we kind of do some peer mentorship all the time. I mean, the biggest topic is how can I be a better dad or mom, actually, and so we think about personal stuff and family stuff is just as prominent as trying to run our businesses, to be honest. And so this is just normal of what we do, and yes, it's true. Some of our mentors are really good at technical specific stuff, but others are really good at this life stuff, I think. And so this is just part of what we do.
I think I have time for one more question. All right, great. So we have one question that says, how did you persuade your mentors that your idea would work and to have them believe it? I think we touched upon.
I mean, this is one of those things where there's not going to be a good answer because the question's almost wrong. The answer is like one, as Fritz mentioned earlier, like self-awareness is incredibly important. We have to know what we don't know, and we have to seek out mentors, advisors who can fill those gaps. Right. But the second thing is like, you're not building a business to please your mentor. You're building a business to like change blank. Right. The end. And your customers and eventually your shareholders and your board and so forth and so on. So yeah, I hate to be that guy, but I feel like the question's almost flawed.
I know, right? I was thinking like, you just gotta, oh my God. You have to just put your best self and your best vision of the company forward and see who that resonates with. There's no like one way to do it correctly. My like communication style, one of, another CEO friend of mine, we were practicing a pitch, and she was trying to do it just for kicks. She was trying to do it my way, and then she was trying to do it her way. And it's interesting, but like the way I pitch is much more very quantitative, very sincere and serious about what I think the numbers are, what I get excited about technology. So when I tried to pitch her company my way, it sounded totally different. And when she tried to like take the words out of my mouth and like repeat what I had said, she couldn't do it because she's like a very funny, very improvisational, very high energy person, and that sort of like calm cadence, quantified cadence coming out of her just sounded wrong. It was terrible. She then like threw everything out and did it her own way, told a lot of funny stories and jokes, showed a lot of her product, and it worked out great. And that's not the way I would have done it at all for I could never do that for mind thinking machines. So yeah, don't try to like do it in a way to please somebody. Just like do it the best way you can with like self-awareness, a sense of humor and humility, and you'll pull in the right mentors for you.
I personally think it's a compliment if someone doesn't believe in your vision, right? If you think about it, right? Because if everyone did, then a ton of people would be doing it. I mean, Brian Chesky at Airbnb, right? He had to talk to 30 investors before somebody believed in his vision. And keep in mind, these investors, this is what they do for a living. They look at all the tech companies. They're super incentivized financially to figure out the winners, and they all passed, right? And the same thing with my company. I don't know how many people we talked to, kind of for Chunar, and everyone passed on it as well, right? And so in a way, it's a compliment, right? So I wouldn't worry about that too much. And is there a connection between, the mentor believing in your vision and providing good mentorship? I don't know. I mean, like I give advice to people. I'm not sure if the idea is going to work, but it doesn't really matter, right? I'm still happy to give advice. So I'm not sure, like being said, I mean, maybe maybe we should think about the question differently.
But Fritz, even in those situations, you believe in the person, right? Even if the idea sounds a little bit like, well.
We do believe in the people, that's for sure, right? I mean, this person has some X factor, some magic, right? Right.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for participating today. I think the time is just about up. And thank you also to all our participants from Zoom around the world. We hope you all got something very useful. I certainly did in terms of mentorship hacks in the startup world. So everyone, please keep everything you learned in mind and stay safe during this pandemic. And we all hope there will be an end in sight. Thank you.
Thank you, Asia Society.
Thank you.
Well done, guys.
All right.
Ready?
Thank you. I made it. You know, Hong Kong is back. There is traffic jam these days. So I want to thank all of you for being with us. I am the Executive Director of Asia Society Hong Kong. I'm Alice Small. And I want to thank Anne, my colleague, for opening. And I wish I was here earlier, but I saw everything in the cab. So first 5 minutes of the presentation. So I want to thank today's participants. And I really want to thank all of you for being with us in our audience. I've always seen Asia Society Hong Kong here, our new iteration in this site, as a startup. And since we started about 8 years ago. So don't be surprised if each of you are getting a phone call from me about coffee for 5 minutes. And then we will go on from there. I know Fritz knows what I'm talking about. So thank you all for this wonderful, really advice and mentorship hack, and as part of the Start Me Up Hong Kong Festival 2020. And we really, really want to thank our speakers today. Thank Bing, Fritz, Stephanie, Lavina, thank you so much for moderating. And Ming Lee, Sketch Post, I've been following it. It's just been so cool to watch it. And also all the wonderful tips. And we would not be able to do this program without the support of all of Asia 21. You know, it's great to have an all Asia 21 panel. And I really am delighted. And this is following up on our earlier program with Rupam Sharma that we had about 2 months ago. And thank Asia Society Philippines. Thank Asia Society Southern California. Thank you for taking part in this wonderful collaboration. And because of COVID, we moved most of our programs online. In fact, all of our program online, and we've been collaborating with all of our Asia Society centers across the world. So this is one more program to that, and they look for more. Although here in Hong Kong, we're kind of opening up, but I think because I think Lavina said earlier, when this is not going away anytime soon, and we will continue to do our programs online as well as hybrid, online and offline. So please join us. And thanks earlier for a plug from Fritz about needing support. We do. It's been a difficult time for a lot of NGOs and us included. And so please, you can be involved with Asia Society Hong Kong by becoming a member. And also financial donations, and join our programs. We have some really exciting programs coming up in the coming weeks. And in fact, the particular one that I want to mention, we're going to have our first annual book sale. We were very fortunate to be donated books from the one of the schools, and we're going to be using that as our first annual book sale, July 30th to August 2nd. So please, if you're cleaning up, those of you in Hong Kong, like me, I've been watching Marie Kondo. I've been cleaning out my closet and cleaning out my bookshelves. So please donate your books and DVDs here. We're starting to take them here at Asia Society Hong Kong, and we're going to have a really fun weekend of books and just really having a great. We're going to celebrate. There are a lot of stuff we can't do right now, but there are a lot of stuff that we can't do here in at Asia Society Hong Kong, and we look forward to welcoming you all, either online or offline, at Asia Society Hong Kong. Again, my gratitude to all of our panelists today and our moderator, and look forward to welcoming you back at Asia Society, either virtually or in person. Thank you.
Good to see you, Stephanie.
Good to see you, Bing. All right, I think.
Do we?
Are we still live?
I don't know. We're still being recorded. I don't think we're still live though. No curse words though. Do we go or?
I think we're. All right, I'm gonna wait for them to. I think they're looking at the monitor where we are. It's funny. I'm just imagining us as these like little robot screens rolling around Asia Society Hong Kong headquarters.